Shalom, brothers and sisters, family online. So, a lot has happened in the last week. Obviously, if you take your eyes off what's happening in the world, which you need to do every now and then, by the way, I'm sure a lot of watchmen and watchwomen are not telling you this, but you need to take a break. You need to step away from technology into nature, breathe deeply, and spend time with your family and the Lord, and just refill with God's strength and God's shalom. So, that being said, so much is happening right now. It is insane, which you've heard me say before, and it's going to stay this way right up until we leave and our feet lift off the ground in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. So I'm going to try and catch you up on various videos during the course of the day on what's happening, and I'll split them into various categories for a reason, and we'll touch on those things. And the first one I'll obviously touch on, as usual, is what's happening in Israel. Now, the biggest news for me, and interesting news, which is going to have worldwide repercussions, is tomorrow the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, will vote on a historic declaration to apply Israel's sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, known to the rest of the world as the West Bank, because they want to remove Israel's connection to the land. Now, most of the people in the Knesset are for this, so this should be an overwhelming yes vote to push forward sovereignty of Israel over Judea and Samaria finally as part of the country, which in my opinion they should have done long time ago. Jesus walked and taught through Judea and Samaria, if you read your Bible. So it is Israel. God sees it as the land. And so I think it's a really good thing. I do think the world is going to lose their minds. Heads are going to pop off shoulders. And the enemy will sweep up a furor against Israel because of this move. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in that vote. So keep a close eye on that. Then Israel ordered evacuations in central Gaza. On Sunday already, the Israeli military, the IDF, issued a new evacuation order for parts of central Gaza, which even after years of war with Hamas in an area where Israeli ground forces have rarely operated, further restricting access between Deir al-Balah and the southern cities of Rafah and Khan Yunis. It strongly suggests that indirect efforts to achieve another ceasefire are far from producing anything effective. It points to Netanyahu pursuing his ultra-controversial plan for a mass resettlement of Gaza's Palestinian population. I think it's exactly that, and we'll touch on that further in a later point. He is trying to move them all to one place and resettle them there, which makes sense when you look at the rubble and destruction, unexploded ordinances, everything that's unhealthy and bad for humanity to live in the rest of the Gaza Strip. So moving them all to one place securely and keeping them safe there and fed while this can be dealt with makes logical sense to me. Does not make logical sense to the enemy, to darkness, or to any of the Arab nations or the rest of the world that's trying to play to the Arab nations. Gazans swarm aid truck and cheer the IDF. This is news that the mainstream media does not want to share with you at all. IDF's Arabic language spokesman published footage showing Gazans surrounding an aid truck as IDF soldiers stand by nearby, with the crowd later cheering them for bringing them aid. The sad part about this whole story is despite showing that the civilians are happy with the IDF's help here and that they are receiving aid, very much contrary to what Greta Thunberg and the rest are saying in the world against Israel. The minute they had that aid and they left, when they re-entered the areas where Hamas is still in control, they were stripped of their clothing, their aid was taken from them, and they were beaten. But no one speaks about that. No one's saying, Hamas, how dare you? And no one's having marches in the street or burning flags of Hamas or Hezbollah or Islamic Jihad or Iran. No, they'll keep quiet about that because it's not Jews, it's not the IDF, and it's not Israel. They're waiting for opportunities to blame and make Israel look as bad as possible. Why do you think that is? Because the enemy has an agenda, and that agenda involves Israel. The Egyptians have rejected Israel's plan for a humanitarian city in southern Gaza. Cairo voiced strong opposition to Israel's plan to establish a humanitarian city on the ruins of Rafah in southern Gaza, warning it could trigger a mass exodus towards Egypt's border and further destabilize the region. They're upset that they're going to be moved to an area of Gaza, so it's still Gaza, but it's too close to Egypt, and they're worried that the Palestinians will come into Egypt. Arabs don't want the Arabs to come there. What do they know about those Arabs? Why don't they want them to come to Egypt? Because they don't want to be destabilized. They don't want terrorist organizations. They don't want the chaos that comes with the Palestinians into their own country. But they insist that they stay in Israel. Do you see there's something strange going on there that no one will talk about? None of the Arab nations want them at all. And we can go into the history of this and go through all sorts of events that have happened that explain to you why, but that in itself should make you wonder. In a phone call last week with US Middle East envoy Stephen Witkoff, Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati firmly rejected the proposal. Israel plans to put a gated camp dubbed the Humanitarian City that will host an initial 600,000 Palestinians displaced from northern Gaza. Once inside, they will be prohibited from returning to their homes, according to the Israeli proposal, because that area needs to be dealt with. The Arab League has also opposed the setting up of such a camp. So all the Arab nations are against the Palestinians moving out of a war zone or to a safer area at all. They all have massive tracts of land, huge real estate that you could put Israel as a country into their excess land multiple hundreds of times over, but they don't want the Palestinians moved to their countries. They also don't want the Palestinian moved too close to their countries. And the world's silent. It's Israel's fault. It's none of the rest's fault. Do you see the twisted logic in this whole situation? Yeah. Trump admin concerned about Netanyahu after the Syria strikes. The recent Israeli military actions in Syria have sparked significant concern in the Trump administration, highlighting a growing rift between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Again, there's constantly a rift. The minute Netanyahu thinks for himself or moves in the best interest of his country and does what he thinks is necessary for Israel, if that goes against what Donald Trump says, then there's a rift. As long as he plays to Donald Trump and does exactly what Donald Trump says he must do, then they're best friends. That's not a healthy friendship. That's a servant serving America, and that is not what Israel should be. The strikes, which targeted Syrian military assets, raised alarm in the White House, with officials questioning Netanyahu's aggressive approach and its potential to undermine US diplomatic efforts in the region. According to Axios, the Israeli strikes began on Tuesday, July the 15th, targeting a convoy of Syrian army tanks headed towards Suwaida, a city embroiled in violent clashes between Druze militias and Bedouin tribesmen. Again, and they've done this before and the world was silent, Syria is attacking the Druze and the Christians. They're calling on Israel for protection, and Israel is rightfully intervening and trying to protect them. For that, they're in trouble with the White House. Makes sense to you? US intelligence reportedly contradicts Israel's narrative, finding no evidence, regardless of the tons of evidence and video footage released by the Syrians doing this to the Druze and Christians, and released by Jews and Israelis online, on Telegram, everywhere. Check out Telegram. Then all of that means nothing to them. There's no evidence, right? No evidence of the Syrian government's involvement in atrocities against the Druze in Suwaida. Despite the tensions, Trump has refrained from publicly criticizing Netanyahu, leaving it unclear whether he shares his advisor's frustrations. Secretary of State Mark Rubio also intervened, urging Netanyahu to halt the strikes, a request Israel agreed to after Syria committed to withdrawing its forces from Sueda. Nonetheless, the episode has strained US-Israeli relationships with countries like Turkey, Turkey hates Israel, and Saudi Arabia, expressing anger to the Trump administration over Israel's actions. So it's quite ridiculous. There's an obvious attack against the Druze and Christians with tons and tons of proof available online and videos to watch. I don't advise watching them because it's quite graphic and horrifying. I don't allow that on my groups on Telegram. It's not a snuff channel where you can watch people being murdered and killed. You don't need to see it. But if you are one of those people who want to see it, there's tons of evidence of slaughter in front of your eyes by the Syrians, of the Druze and the Christians. But according to the White House, no evidence. Israel shouldn't be helping to protect those people, even though that, as the Druze themselves say, is their October 7 happening right now, for the second time now. Foreign ministers of 28 countries call for immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Note, 28 countries said nothing about Hamas. 28 countries, including France, Belgium, and the United Kingdom, issued a joint statement on Monday saying the war in Gaza must end now. Israel must comply with international law. Nothing about Hamas, nothing about the hostages, nothing about what they're doing to the civilians in Gaza, nothing about the beatings and the stealing of aid, nothing about anything about a terrorist organization. Only Israel must comply. If you weren't a Christian and you didn't believe in biblical prophecy, even they are getting that something is out of kilter here and wrong. The foreign ministers representing the co-signatories said the suffering of civilians in Gaza has reached new depths and condemned the drip feeding of aid. Tons of evidence online showing you how much aid is in Gaza and being pushed into Gaza all the time. But Hamas says nothing. The drip aid and the inhumane killing of civilians, including children, seeking to meet their most basic needs of food and water. Israel's foreign ministry rejected the statement and said it was disconnected from reality and sends the wrong message to Hamas. It does. It shows Hamas that the world supports Hamas. They accused Hamas of prolonging the war by refusing to accept an Israeli-backed proposal for a ceasefire and hostage release, which has been done deeply with America's interference as well to impose various things. They've still agreed to all of the tenets of it and they want a ceasefire. Hamas still refuses, but the world does not cry against Hamas, they cry against Israel. Hamas is the sole party responsible for the continuation of the war and the suffering on both sides, Israeli Foreign Minister spokesperson Oren Marmostin wrote on X. Israeli allies also denounced the statement. US Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee said the statement was disgusting and said the countries that issue it should instead focus on pressuring the savages of Hamas. Brilliant, which those countries won't do. Germany was notably absent from the statement. However, German Foreign Minister Johann Wadepool had previously said that he spoke with his Israeli counterpart Gideon Saar and expressed the greatest concern about the catastrophic humanitarian situation as the offensive widens. He called on Israel to work with the EU to enable more humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. They don't need help to get more aid into Gaza. Go look at the proof. There is tons of aid over and over again for all the people in Gaza. What they need is to move the people out of Gaza into a safe zone, preferably in a bordering neighboring country, so that Gaza can be dealt with. Hamas can be dealt with, the place can be cleaned, the ordinances removed, the buildings sorted, everything so that it is a safe area for them to come back to. But no, That's not what the world sees or what the world says at all. Then, to give you an idea of what Israel's dealing with, this next article, which is current, very current right now, shows you the mentality that Israel has to put up with. The Palestinian Authority condemns Jerusalem Food Truck Festival as cultural Judaization. The Jews can't pray on the Temple Mount because then they're attacking the Temple Mount and they're trying to Judaize it, right? Make it Jewish. Now they can't have a food truck festival, which every country in the world does, including South Africa down in Cape Town. You're not allowed to do it because you're trying to push your culture on a place that's not yours, where it actually is, and there's proof biblically and historically to those facts. The Palestinian Authority said Jerusalem will remain Palestinian despite all attempts at erasure and Judaization. Really? Seems very illiterate to not understand. The Palestinian Authority issued a fierce condemnation of the Auto Ochel Food Festival taking place in the Armon Hatzif Promenade in southern Jerusalem, accusing Israel of using culinary and cultural events to push a colonial agenda. Having fun and enjoying food at a food festival has now become a weapon. In a statement released on Monday, PA's Jerusalem government alleged the festival is part of a broader Israeli effort to erase the Palestinian identity of Jerusalem, because there is none, and impose an artificial cultural reality, which is biblically and historically proven to be real. The PA described the event as an instrument of cultural Judaization intended to distort Jerusalem's history and present the city as inherently Jewish. The Auto Ochel Festival, now in the final week, is a 4-week celebration featuring food trucks offering kosher dishes from Jerusalem-based restaurants and renowned Israeli chefs. Not allowed to eat your Jewish food either, because people might think that the place is Jewish. History is there, even if you don't use the Bible, that proves without any doubt that this is the Jewish state, the Jewish land, with a Jewish history, going back thousands and thousands of years. Not a Palestinian state, not a Palestinian history at all. The Bible reinforces that with the lease for the land given by the landowner to the people approved to be living on the land, and said people brought back by the owner that were once scattered all over the world to the land that was leased to them. And said owner is returning to said land at the end of the tribulation period to try and explain this to everybody in one sitting as he gathers all the nations together in judgment. Because apparently we're too dense to understand facts. And that article proves it. They might as well come and declare Zimbabwe irrelevant because it belongs to Wakanda and Wakanda's history. What? Hollywood said so. I've seen the videos and the movies. I mean, it's definitely true. I rest my case. Pray for Israel. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray that more Jews, Arabs, Palestinians, everyone have experiences with Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, and turn to him while there is still time. He is the only answer to peace in the Middle East. There is no other answer but the Prince of Peace. Shalom.